the Bain Free Radio Hour.
Hello and welcome to the Bain Free Radio Hour. Today on the show, Jeremy Comeaux interviews David Weber and Jane Linskold on their latest Honorverse work, Friends Indeed. After that, we bring you part 3 of the serialization of Mark Van Name's John and Lobo novel, One Jump Ahead.
And welcome everyone to another episode. I am your host, Jeremy Comeaux, but that's not why you're here. You are here because of these two fine authors, Ms. Jane Linskold and Mr. David Weber. Welcome, and thank y'all for coming in. And we're here primarily to talk about Friends Indeed, their new story in the Honorverse, but we're going to try and find out more about our authors themselves. So before we get started, where can let's handle the business part and get it out of the way. And where can people find you online, in person, things like that, so that they can meet you or online or in person?
Well, most people who given the opportunity to meet me run the other way, but
Weber.
yeah,
Good.
I'm on Facebook, and I do have a site, but I have not been to it in far too long. Other things intervened, but you can find me at David Weber author on Facebook, and you can find me at there's also a David Weber the author group that is moderated that I drop in on quite frequently, but it's not really me.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in the last century, man. I mean, this high-tech stuff, I don't know.
We were born in the 1900s.
And you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Blue Sky. And I do a blog twice a week. I have managed, even with surgery, not to miss it for a scary number of years now. And on Wednesday, I write about whatever the heck I feel like. And on Friday, I tell you what I'm reading. Otherwise, I don't hang out online very much.
Yeah.
Do y'all have any upcoming appearances or anything like that?
Jane?
Not really.
Okay.
And not until August when I do our local con, Bubana. I'm still recovering from rotator cuff surgery, so I deliberately didn't schedule myself for a lot.
I'll be at LibertyCon in Chattanooga, and I'll be at PCon in Texas. As a matter of fact, being at PCon in Texas is why the hip replacement can't be scheduled till October.
And depending on how the world shapes, we might make it down to PCon because we haven't seen Weber and Sharon in person in way too long.
That would be great.
So before we started recording, Jane and I were talking, and she said that y'all have known each other
Long time.
And so when how did y'all meet?
Well, Jane, I think that the first time we met was when you were at Magnum Opus Con talking about the literary biography of Roger you were working on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Magnum Opus.
You remember the year on that?
No, it would have been the mid-90s.
Yeah, probably about 92,
early
93.
90s.
Yeah. Because I had my first book came out in 90, and I think I had 2 out by then, so it would have been 92, 93, something.
Yeah,
like that.
one of them was, I like to say that you had 1.5 novels, because one of your novels was with Steve White.
Yeah.
And my first short story had just come out. So we could get the year by looking at the publication date on that short story.
But if I do that, I'll feel really, really old, Jane. But I think you guys were mocked twice, right?
Right.
Second time was when Roger and oh boy, I'm 72 now in my memory, isn't it?
Chelsea Quinn Yarborough was one of his was also a guest of honor.
No, I'm thinking about the signing that we did at Sharon's bookstore.
Right.
It was Roger and me and Shards of Honor, Miles Verkosigan. I am just What I'm losing his name.
Lois
Yes.
with Foster
Yes.
Boujon.
See,
Yes.
I remember movie titles. I remember books, but I can't remember that it was Denzel Washington who was in the movie. Okay.
Yeah. And the Roger in question, just in case you don't know,
yeah.
our
Sorry.
shared landscape was Roger Zelazny,
Yes.
who was a dear friend.
So I went to my first signing sitting between those two authors. Okay.
Bujold and
Yes,
Zelazny.
which made me feel like, and I sold every copy of my book the bookstore had. I think all 7 of them. Okay,
Yeah.
and I was,
But
the time. I'm sorry, Jane. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking. For me, that was the first autograph I did that wasn't for a family member, and it was for Sharon, who you would later marry.
Yes.
He found out I had a short story out.
Yep.
Went and checked the shelves, found out they had a copy of the anthology, and brought it over for me to sign.
Yep.
So
now, and where we really got to know each other was when my 78 Volvo died just south of town when I was coming to a convention in Jane's hometown, and they had
region.
Well, okay, but they had to, like demothball an assembly line in Sweden and then send the parts by Windjammer. So she wound up stuck with me for was it 10 days, Jane?
Yeah.
Yeah. As an unexpected house guest. That was the con that I came home from and found out that we'd had a power spike apparently 20 minutes after I left, and every bit of food in the refrigerator was spoiled, and it had taken out my hard drive. And I couldn't find the floppy for the short Victorious War that I knew I had.
Weber,
yeah,
you're showing us the top of your head.
Well, okay.
I mean, it's lovely, but
okay. I thought this was just sound. I mean, but yeah. And I told Tony, I called Tony and said, "This is awful. Hard drive's gone." She said, "Well, where's the floppy?" I said, "I don't know. I know I made one." She said, "David, So I had about 2/3 of the book in hard copy from like 3 generations back. So, and this was before I used voice recognition software. So I'm frantically re-keyboarding and then going over again, stacking pizza boxes in the living room because that's what I'm stopping to eat. And so I got all the way done, got it shipped off. Thought, well, I should probably do some house cleaning, and grabbed my. You remember Melody Ann, Jane?
Oh,
you
yes.
Yes.
Felt like plush.
Yes.
Lovely dog.
She was like an 80-pound velvet wrapped oil drum, half lab, half Rottweiler. And so I'm pulling her bed out from under the drawing table where she spent her time when branches weren't coming through. Well, actually, when branches were coming through the window. And there was this disc that had teeth marks all over it that said short ick R on it. So I called Tony and I said, I knew I had done it. I just found it. Melody. Yeah, I found it in Melody's bed. And she said, "You're telling me the dog ate your homework?" And I'm like, well, yeah, But yeah, that was quite a trip. But Jane put up with me, okay, and we've been friends ever since.
What I liked about that particular thing was how surprised you were that I came and got you and took you home.
Yes. Well, actually, that whole trip was when the timing gears went and I coasted to the side of the road. This guy pulled up behind me. And he said, "Car trouble?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm not sure what it is." And he said, "Well, there's a place in town that works on these. I've run a mobile home distributor. I'll just have my driver come out and tow you in." And I said, "Well, how much?" He said, "You don't owe me anything. I'll just, drop it off at the garage for you." And I was like, wow, my experience has been that most people are really decent. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you're not being decent, it's probably because there's something seriously wrong that nobody else knows about.
Right.
Well, and I think actually bouncing back to the writer life of things, that's very much reflected in one reason you write such great. I jokingly refer to them as mustache twirling villains, because they sit and have conference with each other while they discuss all the nasty things they're going to do.
They're just planning ahead.
Yes, but it's because you believe in decency.
Yeah.
That you can write such believable people who are thinking about being less than decent.
That may actually be true. I hadn't thought of it that way.
I put my English professor brain on periodically.
Well, I do know that if you analyze my good guys, okay, the bottom line is that they all are responsibility takers. And if you analyze my bad guys, the bottom line is that they're not. Okay, now the reasons they're not will vary from one to another. But Jane, you may have just hit on something there that I hadn't thought about. Thank
Like I
you.
said, I put on the English
Yes.
professor brain periodically.
Yes.
I honestly enjoyed that part of my life.
Yeah, I think the next time that I spent any time with you, though, Jane, was that trip to New Mexico that last year.
We met up at a bunch of cons here
Yeah.
and there, but yeah, you came out to New Mexico.
Oh, Jane, I have to tell you,
Oh, what?
one of the books that I lost in the office.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. It just gone. Yeah. And I was, of all the books I lost, that's the one I was most brokenhearted over.
You ought to tell Jeremy which book it is.
It is an Easton Press presentation hardcover of This Immortal that Roger signed for me the summer that we lost him.
Yeah.
And it just meant a lot to me, and I had it in a place of honor on my bookshelves, which means that it wasn't shelved among my regular reference books. And when the roof of the office caved in, when the tree hit it, the roof folded down over the bookshelves that most of my reference works were in, and the tree came down squarely on the shelf that book was in.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
I wasn't going to tell you, but then
Yeah.
But
do you have the book that less important, but the book I signed for you? There was, Weber, my career has been very weird. And Weber said he got sick of the fact that I kept selling novels, but they wouldn't come out.
Yeah.
So he has somewhere in his stuff, he has a very rare copy.
Oh, the Brother of Dragons?
No, the copy of Hoyle's Rules for the Game.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because
you decided to sign something else. Yes.
You were sick of not having a signed book.
But I do have a signed book of yours.
Oh, yeah.
I have a signed copy of Brother, was it Sister
Brother to Dragons,
Companion to Owls, yes,
yep.
Which is still my favorite book that you ever wrote. And I'll tell you why. Okay, I figured this out a while back. The first book that you discover a writer you really like in is always the best book that person ever wrote, as far as you're concerned, because you don't get to discover them over again.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I've got a soft spot for Your Path of the Fury.
Yeah, I think it works that way.
Yeah. So we've known each other way too long.
Yes.
Basically, when Roger died and I was extremely broken, Weber called me every day. At the time when long distance, they charged you by the minute. But he called me every day.
Yeah.
And when he and Sharon found out I was going to be on my own, my birthday, they flew out to see me. This is before they'd figured out they were dating.
Yeah, but we were just friends. Yeah.
And when I met my Jim, who I've been married to now for, how long is it? 28 years. And I really didn't want to get involved in another relationship. Weber was the person who sat on my head and told me I was not allowed to be a coward. So it's a friendship that goes beyond the writing.
Yes.
I was about to say that's a good friend that'll make you do what you don't want to do.
I was so broken. I don't even want to think about it. I was so broken.
Yeah. Well, Jim was good for you.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah.
He's ornamental.
Yeah. Sharon and I are coming up on, let's see, this one was 20.
I think it's
26. We're coming up on 27th in April.
Yeah, I know, because you called me every day when you were courting. When you finally realized you were courting, I got it in the installment plan.
Yeah, it was one of those things.
It was cute, absolutely adorable.
Sharon still gives me grief over that whole. It's like, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she told me she was going to accept your proposal before she told you.
Oh yeah. Did I ever tell you about how she announced that she had accepted it?
Yes, but it's a good story.
Well, she told me that we were going to go celebrate friends of ours' anniversary. Okay, and I had forgotten the fact because I didn't keep track of this kind of stuff. She did that. We'd celebrated her anniversary like 4 months ago. Okay, so we go to one of the hibachi grill restaurants here in Greenville, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to one of the other people she's invited, and the chef comes in, and I'm still talking, and Sharon pokes me and said, "Look," and I said, "What?" And I looked, and as soon as I looked, he like swiped his spatula across the grill because the oil was smoking. And what he had done was he had written the word yes in oil on the grill, but I hadn't seen it. So I said, "Well, what did it say?" And she said, "It says yes." She said, "Yes, this isn't an anniversary party, it's an engagement party." And I said, "Oh, really? Well, good, because," and I pulled out the ring, "I've had this in my pocket ever since I had you were married." And that box was squished, you know. But yeah, it was one of those things.
That's adorable.
It was fun. It was fun.
Well,
So,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Book. We've been
Book,
15 minutes without
wait.
talking about the book.
Yeah,
How
let's
could
bring
this
it back.
be? How could this be?
So I definitely see how y'all became collaborators. So how did this because this series is a prequel to the main storyline of the Honorverse, correct?
Yeah, I think of it as it definitely comes earlier than the Honor Harrington books, and there are characters in these books who are essential underpinning, if you will, of the Honorverse books, but they're only seen in like cameo historical factoid bits and pieces in the other books. I don't think of them so much as a prequel, although they are,
Mhm.
as I think of them as the young adult entry into the Honorverse, and putting them, earlier in time than Honor lets me not make it all about wars and military confrontations and
Mhm.
and that kind of thing, which was what I wanted to write. Something not war, not, I mean, there's chicanery, there's villains, there's, existential threats to the tree cats, even if nobody knows it yet, that kind of thing, but not the giant fleets of ships firing bazillions of missiles. Firing, as one person put it, a Weber worth of missiles at one another, um, and it was okay. I did the novella, really. It's too long to call a short story. A Beautiful Friendship, for one of the anthologies. And Jane, was you were in that anthology too? I can't remember.
No, I think I was in the one after that.
Okay, well, I remember you did Ruthless, and before that you did Queen's Gambit, and well, actually, you did Queen's Gambit first, and then you did the story. This one title is
I
getting away.
can't remember.
Okay, the one in which Michael and Ruth meet each other,
Yep.
and he helps her escape, and Ruthless.
Right,
Somewhere in the same time frame was Ruthless, I think.
right.
But anyway, uh, A Beautiful Friendship was about the first contact between humans and tree cats, and the person who discovered tree cats, Stephanie Harrington, ancestor of Honor Harrington. As a matter of fact, Honor's middle name is Stephanie. Okay. And I decided to expand it into a novel, which I did as a solo book. But when I started moving beyond that solo book, Jane had been one of the short stories are what builds canon in the Honorverse outside things that I had already been planning on. Okay, so it's like it injects facets into the Honorverse that hadn't, that, and that's the reason I get other people to write the stories, is because they help me see facets of the Honorverse that I hadn't already seen. Okay,
Mhm.
and Jane has done, I think, at least as many short stories as any other
I've
one
done 4 or
author.
5.
Yeah, So it was an easy move for me to ask her if she wanted to help
Yeah,
write,
and
do these books.
yeah, and you had me on deck actually before the novel version of A Beautiful Friendship came out, because you sent me the manuscript of it.
Yeah.
And I made a few suggestions that we've since built on.
Yeah. So the second book in the series, which is our first joint project, is Fire Season. Yeah. And then there's Tree Cat Wars.
Mhm.
And then A New Clan.
And then A New Clan, the current one. Yeah.
No, and then Friends Indeed is the current
Friends
one.
Indeed is the current one. Yes. The reason I said that it was the current one, Jane, is that I was just looking in that manuscript for a factoid that I needed for the story that I'm working on now for the new anthology.
Yeah.
So that's what popped it to the front of my brain.
Yeah. So this is our fifth.
Yes.
And
we have one more under contract, and in my current visualization of the Cosmic All, that will end the YA books. But they've transitioned. It's kind of like the one thing about the Harry Potter books, okay? If you read them as they came out, and you were the age that they were aimed at when they first came out, then by the time you got to the final book, you were 10, 15 years older than you were when you started the first one. You had that much more maturity and so forth under your belt. But if you came to them as a precocious 12-year-old and read all of them in a binge, then you're dealing with some stuff that's heavier than in the early books. And there's quite a bit of that in this one. Although I do think, Jane, would you agree that this is in many ways, I wouldn't say the darkest, but that it has some darker strands in it than the earlier ones?
Well, it has to. I mean, the kids are facing some more adult issues. I mean, they've hit the age where they can stand up to some of the demons in their lives and deal with them.
And there's one character in this book who has some real demons to stand up to. I'm not going to say who, because that would constitute a spoiler.
Yeah.
But Jane, okay. When I first started talking to Jane about this, Jane already knew that I had some really strong views on YA novels, and I think we share them. But I also think that she's like, okay, that dystopian thing you didn't want to do. Why are we doing so much of this?
I actually did. Well, the thing that to summarize, basically, Jeremy, while we were waiting for Weber to log on, you asked me. You said you really liked the book, and gee, it was YA, but what did we call YA? And Weber and I both share the philosophy that a YA should not talk down to anybody. It should not be oversimplified. Simply, you're dealing with younger people, dealing with younger people's issues. And as the characters age, so do the issues age with the characters. So when we hit Friends Indeed, I actually, knowing Weber really dislikes dystopias.
Oh, I hate it. Yeah.
And
well, especially for younger readers, the last thing that they need to be told is that the world is as bad as they think it is, if they're hiding in their books. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point. And there were so many YA dystopian books that came out. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I was a little surprised when Weber, because I was doing my best. I always do my best when we will debate how to handle a point. But I also do my best to respect that this is his universe and it should have the flavor he wants his universe to have. So I was somewhat startled that he wanted to walk into what many people would consider dystopian territory, though I think the way it was handled was far from dystopian.
Well, see, part of the problem is how you define dystopian. Okay, dystopia to me is we survived at the end. Okay, Now, a story that has, you could call it a dystopian element in it, but in which we won at the end is not dystopian as far as I'm concerned. There's a totally different message in there. And also that even though I don't like dystopias, there are issues that are totally valid to be dealt with in YA books, some of which are more critically important to young readers than to anybody else because of what they've been through, what they're discovering, the voice they're trying to find for themselves. And in this particular instance, the dark thread was especially important to me because of someone I know and love who had to deal with exactly the same darkness. But the book is not all doom and gloom by any means. I mean, in fact, I think it's a significant plot strand. Okay. But it is more significant on a personal level for the characters, if you will, than on the macro level of where the stories and the history of the Tree Cats in general are advancing to. Would that work for you, Jane?
Yeah.
So speaking of, for the uninitiated, let's, since we're on book 5, can we give like a brief synopsis of how we get to where we are in book 5 with the other books?
Not really.
No,
Yeah.
not brief. Yeah.
I mean, it's 5 books. I get it.
Book 1 takes Stephanie from age 10 through the significant action in the first part of the book. She's 11, and that's when she meets Lionheart.
Mhm.
Then there's a bit of a jump, and Weber takes her up to about 14, where she and Lionheart are, so to speak, a known quantity, a known couple. But Stephanie is facing some different issues that I don't want to get into because that would end up summarizing the whole book. The fire season is, to me, in many ways, one of my favorites, because it's the book in which Stephanie realizes that the rest of the world is not only populated by idiots who she has to sneer down her nose at for being less wonderful than her.
You can't punch them all in the nose, you know.
but that there are a wide variety of people who she might just make friends with, and she has her first romantic entanglement, which is important to me because one thing I said to Weber is we're in an awkward situation here, in that because you've already got Stephanie's major landmarks mapped out, any attentive reader of the Honorverse will know who Stephanie will eventually marry.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yes.
But I said it's really important to me that Stephanie's first and only love isn't that person. I said, you and I both had first marriages that were maybe a little too young and a little too whatever, because we both kind of bought into the first person you fall in love with is who you're supposed to settle down with. And I said, let's not perpetuate that myth.
Yeah.
And so we introduced a perfectly good person for Stephanie to have her first romantic attachment to, and she really begins to develop the cadre of friends who will become the core of the great Tree Cat conspiracy.
Yeah. Stephanie is a very, 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 very intelligent person. She's very smart. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. But I mean, she's smart. And she also has, her family are from the system of Myrdal. And they've immigrated to Sphinx after the plague ravaged the star kingdom of Manticore. And they've settled on a planet whose gravity is 1.35 times that of Earth. And one reason they've settled there is they're genetically modified for a heavy grav environment. And you find out in the mainstream books that the Myrdal mod, the one specific one that the Harringtons are descended from, also had an attempt to enhance intelligence, IQ. And that one of the side effects that they have discovered of especially the early attempts to do that is it can lead to someone who has a short fuse, if you will, which is part of Honor Harrington. I mean, if you go back and you read the book, she's disciplined it. She's committed it to another purpose so that she's not a wolf, she's a sheepdog, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Stephanie has her share of that, which is why she wants to punch people in the snoot when they get in her way. She's used to being ahead of her age mates in intellectually and so forth, but she's actually lagging a little bit behind them in some of the emotional interplay with people who you meet rather than being related to, if you follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And she has she's not very patient with people who she thinks are, especially people she thinks are deliberately doing stupid things. Okay. Which is why she so much wants to punch Trudy in the nose the first time they meet, you know. And what we're looking at now is by the end of Friends Indeed, she's like her 18th birthday, Jane?
17.
17th. Okay. I know that was okay. So the birthday in the course of the book is her 17th birthday. So she's working on 18 at the end. That's what I was thinking about. And she's learned a lot. Okay. And part of what she's learned are things that I always intended her to learn. Other things are things that she's learned because of the relationships with the characters going on in here that I had not pre-planned at all. And a lot of that is from where Jane is shaping the way that the other characters are interacting with her and how she's responding to that. Okay. And I think it helps, actually, Jane, that we have slightly different takes on exactly who and where Stephanie is at any given point, because I'll write a scene in which she's doing something and Jane will say, well, wait, and Jane will write a scene in which she's doing something. I'll say, nah, she's gotten a little bit past that point in her development. And I think it keeps us both honest in a way when we're dealing with her.
Yeah. So Fire Season is a real landmark for Stephanie blossoming as a multidimensional human being as opposed to a child prodigy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's how Stephanie needed to be, because she's going to be a very responsible and pretty nifty adult.
Yeah.
Then after Fire Season, we did Tree Cat Wars because I really wanted to do a book that took a look at tree cat society in its complexity, as opposed to the, cute little adorable ones that say bleak. And dealing with some of the drawbacks of being a telempathic race.
Yeah.
Which actually makes the tree cats all the more admirable, because they have chosen not to follow what they could have picked a culture path that allowed them to exploit their worst side instead of trying to be other. Yeah. And Tree Cat Wars also has Stephanie and Carl go off planet and begin to get their first formal training that will lead to them becoming really talented rangers back on Sphinx. Well, so it's not just a tree cat book. And for me, one of the things that was really moving about that book was poor Stephanie being stuck on Manticore and getting from Anders, the boyfriend she'd left behind, the beginnings of the awareness that something is going really, really wrong with some of the local tree cats, and she's not there to fix it. And Stephanie really wants to fix things.
Yes, that's that responsibility taker side of her. The existing books had established, but only in remarks in passing, that tree cats, there had been instances of violence and even war amongst the tree cats, because the fact that they are telepaths means that by and large, they are by human standards, an incredibly consensual society, because tree cats can't lie to each other. Okay, because you can tell, and there's no point even trying. Until they met humans, they didn't even realize that was a possible thing to do. Okay, so if you're in that kind of a society, you kind of, if you're going to survive as a society, there are certain ways in which the society has to evolve. But no matter how the society evolves, there are still pitfalls that can lead to things like what happens in tree cat wars. Because if you have two empaths who get trapped in a mutually reinforcing cycle of anger, okay, I mean, yes, you can feel his emotions, and you know that he's really, really pissed with you, and you know that you're supposed to be pissed with him because he's in the wrong, the idiot, kind of thing, and you just get wrapped up in the furball. Plus, there's the problem that if you have one member of the clan, okay, who is gradually slipping into what you might call neuroses or insanity, sometimes you don't realize that's what's happening, and it's poisoning that communal net. And especially if the mind healers in the community are under a lot of stress, they may not even realize it or catch it either. And because of the tree cat wars really springs out of the terrible damage to Sphinx's forests in fire season. And it's a clan who's been displaced by the fire. And the conflict between it and another clan, who's at least one of whom sees them as intruders on the second clan's range, and there's not enough to go around, kind of thing. And the humans who know about tree cats are like, okay, do we even want to tell the rest of humanity that these adorable, cute little critters are capable of having actual wars in which they kill each other, for fear that would spread over to how they might react to a human?
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, Jane is right. This is a book that needed to be written. And another thing that it shows, Jane, and I think we started building this very early in the series, is the fact that there can be and is diversity of views even between members of the same clan. When you see them arguing over the best path forward, when you see them castigating each other for mistakes they made, and so forth, that also goes to no, they are not the perfect little arboreal critters who the unspoiled noble savage. Yeah, no, they're not.
And then we moved on, and a new clan. I wanted to explore I wanted a book that wasn't about somebody is trying to kill the tree cats this week.
Yeah. Yes.
And
that's next week. Yes.
Yeah. Because the first three books all had elements of somebody is trying to.
Yeah, Beautiful Friendship really didn't. It had somebody trying to kidnap tree cats.
Yes.
Okay. I'm just saying.
And I really liked the novella Weber had written called Heart of Stone, and said I would like to see more of these characters. Whatever we do, can we weave that in? Mm-hmm. And so we wove that in specifically at my request, because I thought he had come up with some really great people and a really great view of how the post-plague survivors on Sphinx had made blended families and all these other things. And I wanted to deal with some of the implications to what the plague did to people. Sometimes, and Weber may thump me around the ears if he wants, but sometimes I felt like in the early books, Sphinx was just a little too perfect. All the, it was like a 1950s Happy Days episode. They go to the soda fountain and they, and they have clubs and all the bad comes from the outside, from people who want to disrupt this sort of idyllic 1950s that never was.
I would not say that Stan Chang came from the outside.
I I was the one who actually made Stan quite
but-
the bully.
Yeah.
He was.
Yes.
And Weber, you throw a challenge at him and he bites the hook and runs with it. And,
Well, part of the problem, and Jane, I can't remember the exact passage, but there's one scene that really kind of opens this. Stephanie arrived on Sphinx at the tail end of the plague. Okay, by the time she got there, people weren't dying in droves. Okay, she didn't come from a family that had lost 3 grandparents, 4 uncles, etc. And so she didn't have those dark places down inside. Now, I think we'd already established that Carl had lost Sumiko before we got to this book.
yeah, but that's because the tree branch fell on.
Yeah,
her.
okay, I understand that. But the only reason she was there for the tree branch to fall on is because
Right.
she'd been adopted by his family because of the plague. But one of the things that happens in this book is there's a new drug in town. Okay. And Stephanie is like, well, why would anybody want to do that? And then that's when she realizes, these friends of hers who she knows and everything, they have lost all these people, except maybe Jessica, because she's a newcomer too. Okay. They've lost all these people. They've got these dark places. They've got these wounds down in there. So, of course, they want to escape them from time to time. And that, I thought, was something that it did need to be interjected, and we kind of grabbed that and ran with it a little bit in Friends Indeed, with the French Hitties and their attitude towards the newcomers, and we paid blood for this, and these guys come waltzing in and try to tell us what to do. Who the hell do they think they are? Kind of attitude out of some of the locals on Sphinx.
So basically what it boils down to is your question was, can you tell us something about the first book? And the thing is that they are different, but they really do feed into each other. I think much more than because the characters are so young and we're literally hitting pulse points, a kind of a landmark in every book is Stephanie's birthday.
Yeah.
It's the touch point where in fire season, her parents tell her she has to invite people over for her birthday, and she has a fit. And by Friends Indeed, she realizes she actually wants to invite people over.
I think the characters in what people persist on calling the mainstream books, I think that they develop and change just as much as the characters in these books, but those books are spaced closer in time, and there's more external factors, and there's a bigger cast. So it's like when you read On Basilisk Station, okay, and then you go and you look at Mission of Honor, okay, where Honor Harrington is telling Queen Elizabeth, shut up, you're wrong, okay, as opposed to, oh my God, I'm going to go meet the Queen in the first book. You realize how much she's grown and changed in the intervening 25 years, but it's coming up on you gradually. These people are young enough that they're changing in leaps and bounds,
Right.
if you see what I mean.
And you asked Jeremy earlier about, what makes a YA. I think one of the things about a YA is a good one, is that the kids aren't static like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. They are living, breathing people who literally the events of a month may make a huge difference in how they see the whole world.
Yeah. And to me, that's been important with the characters and everything I've ever written, is that happens. But I think it's even more comes to the fore more in a YA. And I wanted to say earlier when we were talking about, how do you write a YA and without writing down, I remember what Robert Heinlein said about it. And he was asked about it, and he said, you write it just the way you would for an adult, then take out the cuss words and the sex. Okay, well, these days, there's less of taking out the cuss words and the sex in some ways. But by the same token, kids, young people, young readers have a whole lot broader palette to read than they had in Heinlein's day when he was saying that.
And there was a lot more. And I have to sometimes explain to my younger friends that the phrase unprintable is not a euphemism. It literally means it could not be printed.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. One example, Podkane of Mars. Okay, now Bain published a version of Podkane that had Heinlein's original ending on it, but he wanted to kill Podkane at the end of the book. And his editor told him, no, you can't do that. Not in a YA. Now, I happen to think that from a storytelling perspective, his editor was right. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that the reason that Heinlein couldn't do it was because they told him, you can't do that. You can't put that into a young reader's story. And, Jane and I are willing to put serious consequences into the books. We're willing, characters die in these books. Characters are badly hurt in these books. Characters have to make decisions about what am I going to do to protect myself and the people that I love in these books. And I think that's fine, because those are questions that everybody has to grapple with, really, one way or another in the course of their lives. And I think this is a totally appropriate stage for characters to be doing that on. But the one thing that I never, ever, ever want to do is to say they're their child when I'm writing the story. Okay, to talk down. I don't worry about my vocabulary when I'm writing these. I don't worry about, okay, are they going to know what this word means? Are they going to know what the nuances of this adverb are? Because I think a surprising number by some people's standards of young readers will know what that adverb's nuances are, and another chunk of them will go look it up, and others will absorb it by context and add it to their own vocabulary. Okay, I did that when I was reading. Of course, I was reading mainly adult books because the YAs, there weren't a whole lot of them around. By the time they were around, I was to the point where I'm fine over here reading, Doc Ed Smith and kind of thing. But, yeah.
Well, and so to tap onto that, I found the book very, very relatable. As far as, because they felt like real people, because they had real problems.
Yep.
And some of it was pretty dark. And that one thing that we're not going to talk about because it's going to give stuff away, but there's some darkness in there, but it's still appropriate for a younger audience because young people go through dark stuff, So I found that very relatable, and I was like, oh wow, yeah.
But I think it's particularly appropriate if you started with a beautiful friendship and worked your way up to it, because you've seen these characters growing and changing and what they're confronting and everything. So you're ready to stand there in the background behind them while they deal with it in this book, I think.
I think one of my favorite things about doing these books with Weber is I'll introduce a character he doesn't expect, and like Nosy Jones. And oh my gosh, when he started reading the manuscript of A New Clan where Nosy was introduced, he called me up and he was like, I do not like this guy. And I was like, keep reading. And by the end of the book, Tony was going to him, I don't like this guy. And he's like, keep reading.
Keep reading. Yeah.
But I do like the fact that that sometimes I'll introduce an element and he'll fall for it and adopt it, and other times something like when he wrote Heart of Stone, I'm the one going, I really like what you did here. I want to see more of this family. So it's not I think the synergy it can be very good.
Oh, it can. Especially when it leads to an ooh shiny moment, at my end, when it's like Nosy, for example. Okay. There's a fair amount of me in that character's DNA now, but he originated as James. Okay. And as we kind of unpacked him on the one hand, and on the other hand, wove more threads into it. He became one of my favorite characters in the entire book. Jessica was Jane's originally, and I think she is one of my favorite characters. She certainly is. Jessica is the character who I think is best for Stephanie.
Mhm.
Okay, Carl will always be there for her. He'll kill anything that comes after her, et cetera, et cetera. But Jessica, it was her first real best friend.
Mhm.
Okay, and that bond and that seeing the universe through Jessica's eyes was huge for Stephanie.
Yeah, so it's fun.
Yeah. Well, so y'all are talking about, who's writing it. How do y'all divvy up the work on
It's
a joint
been
book?
different with every single book. And a lot depends on scheduling, trying to find better ways to work together. Weber said to me at one point when we were disagreeing over a plot point, he said, "Jane, it's more important to have you as my friend than it is to have you as a book collaborator." And so we keep trying to find ways to work together that will allow us both to be creatively involved.
Yeah.
And so for this Friends Indeed was the first one we did an outline for.
Yeah.
I hate outlines.
I do too.
I am like, they talk about, I hate the terms plotter and pantser, but they're the ones everyone knows.
I know.
And I am so far on the intuitive writer side of the thing that the sheer idea of having to write to an outline makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
But we wanted, this book had so many plot lines going together. And so what happened is for this one, we talked on the phone a lot. And I took copious notes, and then I wrote them up into a rough outline with notes to Weber about, okay, you said you wanted to handle this element, I'll handle this element, etc. And then he added to the outline, and until we were both kind of certain. And there's an awful lot of intercutting in there.
Yeah, especially once we made sure that we had exterminated as many continuity errors as possible. But Jane had an extra burden in this book because she had shoulder surgery while we were working on the final edit, the final put it together and everything. And then
I will say I had given you the manuscript almost a year before my surgery, dear.
Hey, I didn't say that it, that it was, because I had other things that were, so the on the editing end, okay, I got the copy edit and I said, Jane, okay, let me take a run at it here. And I think I put all of the changes in different color typeface so that you'd see exactly where I changed anything. And then we had a conference with her arm in her sling and everything, in which she went through and said, okay, this one works, this one, here's a problem, and here's why. And I had the manuscript open before me, and we worked out how to deal with each of the places where she had a problem with what I had done. And then I sent the manuscript off to Tony at that point and said, okay, this is it, we're done. It was... The thing about collaborations, or one thing about collaborations, is you have to be able and willing to modify the way that you would have approached it in order to get it done. Okay? And I'm not talking necessarily about just stylistic stuff either. I'm talking about workload and where you wind up with Jane having gotten the manuscript to me. I got it I got the final edit version of it back to her and to Tony, I think, after about 6 or 7 months. But Tony didn't get back to us on the the edit requests for like another couple of months. And by that time, between us, Tony and I had pushed Jane into her surgery window, which was, I live with somebody who is now, she's now up to 38, Jane. Sharon is up to 38 surgeries, including the one that you had on your shoulder. She's had that one too.
Yeah, well, mine, my rotator cuff surgery was sort of a very massive. My PT guy looked at the MRI and went, "How are you doing all the things you've been doing for me? You shouldn't be able to move your arm at all." And I said, "Well, I'm stubborn."
I would know about that, but yeah.
Well, yeah. So yeah, no, actually, I could actually give you the timetable on what went back and forth because I keep a journal.
Oh.
But the question, how we work on it, it's varied with every book.
Yeah.
Weber, if there's something that is going to be very complicated politically and needs to be absolutely perfect for making sure honor versus continuity doesn't get violated, I want him to do that.
Of course.
I don't want, and anything that I feel that I'm going to end up phoning him every 10 minutes to make sure I have a detail point right, it's better if I hand over to him. But fire season, because of his schedule, we discussed it, put it together, and then I wrote the first draft of it pretty much solo. But then he came back, and it's one of my favorites when people ask, well, what's it like working with David Weber? And I said, well, it's basically, he goes, well, you've got this entire plot point that is based on something that couldn't have happened. And I say, but you told me it could happen. And you said, well, I've been thinking it can't happen.
Yeah.
And in fire season, this was a vessel crashing. So he said, well, let's make it work. And after a lot of discussion, we did a Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and it hit in a swamp, which kept the emergency beacon from going off, and sunk into the swamp, so that the black box was missing, wasn't there, etc. But the thing I like to tell people is the first thing he'll say is, this won't work, and then he'll tell you at great length why it won't work. Then he takes a deep breath and he says, now let's figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's very much more doable.
Yeah.
But I have to tell my favorite story. You said you wanted some of the stories about telling tales on each other.
Oh yeah, please.
My favorite collaboration, probably goes back to, it might have been fire season, it might have been the one after, but I had called, Weber and I were talking on the phone about a particular point. And then we got off the phone and we were exchanging emails. And he had been perfectly amiable and charming. And then all of a sudden the email goes, no, you absolutely can't. No, you can't do that. I won't have, that is unacceptable. And my husband was working at home that day. And I said, I think Weber's lost his mind. I'm going to call him. Well, what turned out was that he had been dictating to me a response, and his 3 very young at that point kids had come into his office, and he had told the voice activated software to go to sleep. But something that he said to the kids made it think it was awake. And so it woke up and started dictating daddy laying down the law, firmly but politely, but absolutely dictator mode, as a dad of a small kids needs to be sometimes. And if we hadn't been really good friends and I hadn't known he would never behave that way to a colleague, God, that could have been.
Oh yeah, could have been bad.
Yeah. Their voice activated software has its advantages and its disadvantages.
Yeah.
Especially with Dragon, which you can turn on and off with a verbal command that can, slip into your conversation without you realizing that it's there. Yeah. I think the the process of writing in general, and these books in particular, there has to be a serendipity element in what you're doing. There has to be a thesis and antithesis, that you work your way through sometimes. Now, the other thing is that, and Tony figured this out a while back, when you're working with me in an editorial mode, and I've tried for decades to not do this, but it's just the way my brain is wired. If you suggest a change to me, I have to identify all the points where it's going to be a problem and get that done before I can look at it and say, okay, now what is it going to do for us that will make it worth all those problems so that we have to solve the problems? You see what I'm saying? And sometimes that leaks over into the collaborative work as well as into the, okay, not a Jane story, but Jacob Holo in one of the in the very first novel that we did together. He killed 4 characters I'd intended to survive. And I called him and I said, Jacob, I did these 4 characters. He said, oh my God, I didn't. I give it back. I'll think like that. Let me keep it. So I took it back, and instead of saving them, I got in there and made what happened to them even worse. Okay, kind of thing.
If we're going to do it, let's make it fun. Yeah.
Well, and he had seen it as a way mostly to remove these characters as an impediment to what another character was going to do. And what I saw it as was an opportunity to explain the reasons the character does what the character does, if you follow me, why the character reacts that way. And that's what happens in a good collaboration. Okay. Somebody says, okay, well, this, and that pushes you into a deeper examination of the inner workings. It could be of the plot, it could be of the character, whatever, that wouldn't have occurred to you in the first place. And one of the things that collaborators have to do is they have to be sensitive to the fact that they are collaborating. Okay. There are some elements in these stories, as Jane says, that have to be worked a certain way. They have to have certain milestones in them because those milestones are established further on in the series. Okay. And those points, it's kind of like there's not a lot of flex there. But the rest of it, all the rest of it is evolving as we go along, which is the way good stories do. It's the way all the books in the Omniverse do, really, if you look at it. And these are no different in that respect. What's different in this respect is that there are 2 voices involved in the evolution of the characters and where they're going.
I'd say the hardest thing for me is that Weber has a lot of stuff between his ears that I think has been there all along, but it's not until I accidentally crossed the street in the wrong direction that he, and this isn't a criticism.
No, I know.
You ignite it, yeah.
that he suddenly goes, no, that can't happen this way.
Because,
And so sometimes, even if we've discussed like in fire season, the shuttle was going to go down and all these off-planet people would get lost. When we're blue skying it, he's very happy with the idea and very excited about the idea. But when it comes to making the technology of that time period work so this can happen, we ran into some stumbling blocks. And I think in the end, we came up with some really cool solutions.
Oh, I think so too. But I think sometimes what happens is, and I do this to myself in my writing. Okay. I'm working along and I got this thing that I'm going to do. And I get there and I say, wait, I can't do that because it violates the logical consequences of the tech I've already built. So
Yes.
how do I approach it? It's different when you're doing it with a writing partner from when you have to do it yourself. But that's something that is going to happen to most conscientious writers at some point. They're going to realize that I got this really neat idea, but it won't work that way. Is there a way I can make it work? Or do I just have to drop back 10 yards and punt?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd say for the next book, to look at the future, we're coming up on some possibly one of the most major events in Stephanie's short life. And for that, when Weber and I sit down to discuss that one, I'm going to say, okay, we've got this major thing. I think we need to start by structuring how and where that's going to happen. And then, that's going to be the spine.
Yeah.
And but I'm going to, because this is something he's had in mind literally since the first phone discussion we had on the series. And
it's been something that's been,
yeah.
Now, I will say this, and this is on me, okay? There's a character in this book who was supposed to wind up doing one thing in the next book, and I'm now going to have that character doing a diametrically opposed thing in the next book. And I think that it makes the character goes from being somebody who you're going to be, how could he possibly do that, to, oh my God, look what he has to do, if you follow me. And there is the key element, the crucial moment in the next book is also one that has been nailed down in canon. The outcome of it has been nailed down in canon.
It's a historic.
Yeah, it's historical. We're you can look at it as we're stuck with it, or it's a good thing and we're working our way towards it. But precisely how the event whose outcome is part of the historical record, I don't think has been nailed down anywhere. And so that's what we're going to have to be working on as we head into it. And it's going to be carrying a few more strands going into that final wrap up than I had envisioned in A Beautiful Friendship time frame, because of how the stories have evolved in the meantime.
So once again, the creative structure of how we do it will change. So the one consistency is we are completely inconsistent because it's what the story needs and what we need to do in order to get the books out in something vaguely resembling a timely fashion.
Well, there's also this, and I have never actually had a character take me over at gunpoint, okay? But I write the stories, and in some way the stories write me, okay? Because the events in the stories, as the characters evolve and change, my perception of what we're doing evolves and changes. Where we're going evolves and changes right along with them. Hang on a second. And that is a I think that's an element of any storyteller, as opposed to someone who I've worked with people who, like, they do an outline, they nail down, this is what's going to happen. And by God, those characters are going to do this when I get to that point. Okay. And I don't understand how that works. All right. I mean, because as you actually write the scene with the character in it, okay, that character is growing and changing as you write. And when you do an outline ahead of time, you can't know how that character is going to have changed in your own mind on the page before you get to this crucial point in the story. And maybe he's going to come at it in a different way. Okay, maybe somebody else is going to have to do the act that you had this person doing, because it's no longer possible for this character to do that. And that, to me, is why, if you're going to stick with the plotter or the pantser, at heart, I'm a pantser. Now, in the Honorverse, I had so many story arcs going in so many different places so far apart, and some, message transit time was critical, that there had to be a detailed outline, a detailed timeline of when actions happened. Okay. But that didn't tell me how they were going to happen until I got there and wrote that part of the story. All right. These, we have a few critical times that have to be nailed down. We got and this is on me more than on Jane. We drifted a little afield from the seasons on Sphinx, bearing in mind that the year is like 5, almost 6 standard years long. Okay, the seasons last a long time, and we got off cycle a little bit. I think we're pretty much back on it now, going forward. But the those kinds of things can catch solo writers too. Okay, it's not necessarily the case because it fell between stools. It's that you get done and you realize, whoops. But it made so much sense when I did it, kind of thing. I mean, I always had a good reason for doing it. It just didn't work out well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't believe it, but we're already at over an hour. But before we go, excuse me, this series, you're talking about the next book. Are we expecting a couple more books? Are we going to be able to enjoy a couple more books, or is it one and done?
I don't know. We have the one more book that is under contract, and like we were saying, there's this huge focal point in Stephanie's life that's going to take place in there. I'm going to have to take a look at how this time frame relates to the Star Kingdom novels that Tim Zahn and I are doing. I don't think we're going to overlap. We're not going to overlap in the end of this book, but there's going to be possible overlap later on. And I do want, at some point, even if it is as just a short story or a novella, the story of Stephanie and the Ninth Amendment needs to be told. Okay. And I don't know where we're going to be after we finish this book. I mean, she's still going to be really, really young, like 19. And of course, now this is a pre-prolonged society. So unlike Honor, who looks like she's 19 when she's 42 in the first book, that's going to be a bigger chunk of her life than it would have been later on. I just don't know where we're going to go. It's going to depend in part on our mutual writing schedules and whatnot too, as to where we can slot stuff in. I don't want the books to end. Okay, that's a problem that I have, you see, because there are so many out there that I don't want to end the story, because I like these people. Okay, I want to go spend more time with them. Yeah. Readers buy books because of the voice of the writer. And the voice of the writer, to me, is elementally bound up in the characters that writer creates and how the characters interrelate. Okay? And so readers want to spend time with those characters. Okay, the problem is the writer wants to spend time with those characters too. All right? And as long as you don't have too many sets of characters running around in your multiple personality split brain or whatever, that's a good thing. But when you have 17 different sets of characters that you need to spend time with, you go, wait, okay. When I was back in the 90s, okay, I was doing 750,000 words a year. Okay. I cannot do that anymore. Not after the concussion, not after the COVID, not after the turning 72, et cetera. And so the amount of time that I've got to budget on the stories that are being told, it has become a more precious commodity to me than it used to be. And we'll just have to see. I don't want it to be done with the next book, but I think we're going to have to write the next book with an eye to its possibly being the final one in the series. That doesn't mean we have to close doors, but we have to give it the kind of wrap that if we can't get back to it, readers won't feel shortchanged down the road. And then, but it could be a wrap that is like, oh, wait, I thought they were done, when we do have time to go back and advance the story further. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be my ideal solution. All right. But we do have to, on this one, we have to be at a full stop spot, I think. And even, I will guarantee you one thing, Jane, okay? If we are at a full stop position on this and we're like, okay, we're done, we are going to have people for the next 20 years asking us when the next the next Star Kingdom book is coming out.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be 92 by then. You
And I'll be like, what book was that? I don't remember.
I didn't even hear what you said.
Yeah.
So, with that, do you guys have any teasers for like projects that we don't know about yet that might be coming out?
Well, aside from the next book in this series, we do
Mhm.
have an anthology coming out shortly in the Honorverse, which will be set basically during Stephanie's lifetime. Okay. And I'm thinking that it's entirely possible that this will be the first in a series of anthologies, which would be set in this early period of the Honorverse, which, even if we can't find time to fit more novels in,
Mhm.
we may be able to kind of extend the story of Stephanie and her life through the short stories. Now, my short story is not exactly the right word, but I'm only up to 19,000 words so far, Jane. And I'm halfway through. Actually, I'm better than halfway through. A lot better halfway through. But anyway, I think mine is the only story in the anthology in which this is going to be true. It's a look back into this time frame from Honor's time, whereas the others are going to be internal to this time frame. Do you see what I'm saying? Basically, Honor is going to be involved in the story that I'm writing as the person who is learning about something that happened in Stephanie's time, and sort of tying it into the I hesitate to say this, but the present day Honorverse. Okay. Yeah, what can I say? And I think, oh, by the way, the term that Aldana comes up with, okay, is tree fox.
I
Yes.
still think weasel cat.
I know you do, but that's because
Next to weasel.
Or ferret. I mean, well, it's kind of like, that whole thing about the lemur monkey and the bobcat mix is really how I've envisioned them. But anyway, they do have certain things in common with ferrets. I will give you that. So I'm working on that and with Jane, and let's see. There are a couple of 3 other collaborative projects in the Honorverse going on. And I am working on, and incredibly behind on, a collaboration with Chuck, which he's being very patient about.
I've known Chuck longer than I've known Weber.
Yes, you have. You gamed with him when you were in college.
Yeah.
Yes. And Jane, was that the only gaming session that you and I ever did together? The one at Carl's?
Pretty much. When you stayed at my house.
Yeah.
When we played Vampires and Werewolves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I was thinking about when I ran the NPC in the campaign where you were the Buddhist albino Buddhist monk. Yeah. I'd forgotten the Hunters Hunted. Yeah. I missed that. Yeah.
Jim just muttered "biker samurai."
Yeah. Come here, peasant. Let me see how sharp this sword is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Bittersweet, but fun. Yeah.
But anyway, we should let poor Jeremy go to bed.
Yes.
But Jane, do you have any projects that
I'm working on something, but I don't really want to talk about it.
Secret squirrel stuff?
No, just the way my brain works. I don't tend to talk about things until they're more or less done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's one place where Jane and I are different. Okay. I will talk about anything, and Jane is like, I haven't finished it yet. I will talk to you about it when it is done. Okay.
Yep.
We will serve no story before it's time.
Yeah. It's just the way my brain works.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, absolutely. And I treasure the way your brain works. Okay. It's just our brains work in different ways.
Yeah.
That's
So,
what a collaboration is all about.
Yes, I am writing, but I don't really want to talk about it.
Well, whatever it is, we're looking forward to it.
Well, thank you.
And you guys, this has been great. I really love talking to you both, and hopefully we get to do it again for the next book.
Well, and also maybe you can sign up for the anthology when we do that. I believe you have a connection indirectly to it.
Yes,
Oh,
you do.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
that would be very cool.
I wasn't telling you anything new when I was talking about that anthology.
No, we're talking.
Yeah.
But I think it would be very good to have you sign up to be the moderator when we do a podcast about that anthology.
What I'd love to do, if we could do it, would be to do it as kind of a roundtable of the authors with you.
Sure.
And
I know
we did that for the What Price Victory anthology. We got as many of the contributors together at the same time with a moderator, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've done those before. Those are fun.
Yes. Okay. Well, if you need to go, I received a text a few minutes ago from I was going to say other half, but I will say better half in this instance because it's going out over the airwaves. And I believe I need to go and feed her supper.
Well, Jim has been listening to this and chuckling.
Yeah, well, that's Jim.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And until next time, I bid you
Until next time, take care, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
And now, as promised, one jump ahead. John Moore is a nanotech-enhanced soldier of fortune. Lobo is an AI, a living weapons and intelligence platform of enormous destructive potential. Two very dangerous wolves in a galaxy of deadly corporate and paramilitary predators. But Moore has grown weary of the killing, and just once he'd like to finish the job without leaving a trail of blood behind him. Not going to happen. Not on a pristine planet called Macon, where two gigantic corporations vie for control of the local jump gate and access to the riches of an undeveloped world. Dealing with a kidnapping and extortion scheme is only the beginning for Moore and Lobo as they work to stay one jump ahead.
As if that's even possible. We run into these naive types in many deals, and it's always the same story. They try to stop progress, and its wheels grind them up. What they don't understand is that I don't have the power to kill this deal. It's done. And whether they do nothing or kill Jasmine or make some other stupid gesture, Calco will develop Macon for the good of tourists everywhere. Then we'll furnish every tourist house and every local's home with Calco washers and Calco refrigerators and on, and everything will work the way it always has. When the new aperture is ready, well, he laughed again. Then, with any luck at all, we'll make the real money. He looked back at me. I cannot stop this. They want me to leave the planet, which I'll gladly do, though I haven't told them that, because they think my departure will matter. It won't. Calco will put in one of my subordinates for however long it takes to import some corporate security folks to protect us, and then I'll be right back. No way is the company letting a new aperture slip away, and no way am I going to give up the opportunity to be the one to lead its exploration. So why not bring in your security folks now and have them get her back? That's exactly what I'll have to do, and soon, because I can't keep the kidnapping secret much longer. But if I do, you know what'll happen. They'll clean out the gardeners, but they'll make a lot of noise and do a lot of damage in the process. The gardeners are local, so other locals will blame Calco. That'll upset the Frontier Coalition government's people, which will slow our work here, cost us even more money, and so on. I want Jasmine back safely, and I want her back quietly. He reached out and gently touched my arm, his eyes now glistening. Screw all that. None of it is the real problem. Avoid exposure is the corporate line, not what I feel. What really scares me is that Jasmine could get hurt in an armed rescue mission. She's my only child. Can you understand what that means? No, I answered honestly. I had no children, had never been willing to even consider bringing another life into the universe. For that matter, I didn't know if I could have children. I thought about Jenny. I do, though, know what it's like to lose the only family you have. That I understand. Then help me, John. Please. I thought about his offer. I couldn't avoid feeling sorry for a young kidnapped girl. I could always use the money. Finding the gardeners should be no problem. I've never known any activist group, however green, that didn't indulge from time to time in such appliance-based conveniences as laundry or hot food. I had no clue, however, what I might be walking into. Whether this was 3 people with a little passion and a few small weapons, or a heavily armed group, so I needed more information. How long did they give you to respond? They wanted me to get back to them in a day, Slake said. I persuaded them that nothing in the corporate world moves that quickly, and we settled on 4 days. That was last night. I haven't slept much since then. He looked way too perfect for someone who hadn't slept. But I suppose maintaining your appearance at all costs is part of the job of an executive. I'll think about it and get back to you in the morning. I pulled out my wallet, thumbed it, and it received Slake's contact information. If I decide to help, I should be able to do so within their time limit. I can't imagine them moving far from Glenn's garden because they'll want to be close to you. The town isn't that large, and I assume you've already verified she wasn't on any departing flights or boats. He smiled in acknowledgement. So, they're either hiding her in some small building you'd never look at twice, or, more probably, in the rainforest. I stood. I know that's not the answer you want, but consider what you'd do if you were on my end of such a proposal, and you'll know it's the only reasonable response. He smiled again. True. That is, of course, unless you were involved, in which case you might be foolish enough to answer sooner. I prefer dealing with smart people, even when you don't like them. You have a shot at understanding their thought processes. I stared straight at him. I'm not involved in any way, though if I were, I would never be stupid enough to appear that eager. I walked him out and basked for a moment in the warmth and the moist air and the steady thumping of the surf. I'll get back to you tomorrow morning.
This has been the Bain Free Radio Hour. Thanks for joining us at the heart of science fiction. Join us next week for part 4 of One Jump Ahead by Mark Van Neen, and our next interview when Sean Hazlitt interviews John Van Stry on his novel, Sometimes in the Fall. Score by Ruth Judkowitz.